What do you do when your uncle takes your grandfather's company, says you were never in the will, and tells everyone you should be grateful for scraps? How do you keep your face calm when you can't even afford the $600 fee to close a safe deposit box that has been unpaid for 40 years? Why did a bank manager waive the fee, and why did the sealed letter inside feel heavier than the gold? My name is Graham Pike. I am 49 years old. I used to work at my grandfather's company. People there knew my face for years. They knew my hands could fix small problems fast. They knew I stayed late when a shipment was late. They also knew I did not raise my voice. I did not fight for attention. I thought good work was enough. In the last 2 years, I learned that good work is not always what people respect. They respect what looks big. They respect what sounds loud. They respect the person who tells the story first. My Uncle Ronan is that person. He is my mother's older brother. He smiles with his whole face when cameras are around. He shakes hands like he owns the air in the room. In family photos, he stands in the center. In business meetings, he speaks like the decision is already made. When my grandfather was alive, Ronan still tried to do that, but he had limits. Grandpa Walter did not let anyone run wild. He could stop a room with one look. When Walter was no longer around, Ronan stopped waiting. I do not say this with anger. I say it like a timeline. The first month after, Ronan became the person people called first. Then he became the person the bank and the lawyers answered first. Then he became the person the company newsletters praised first. After that, it was easy for people to treat me like a memory instead of a person. That is how a slow erasing starts. It does not feel dramatic at first. It feels like small doors closing. You knock, someone says they are busy, and you stand there with your hand in the air. I was living in a small apartment across town, the kind of place where the kitchen light flickers if you run the microwave and the kettle at the same time. I had a steady routine because routines help when money is tight. I made simple meals. I kept my phone on silent. I checked my bank balance too often. I told myself that it would get better when I found the next stable job. Some mornings I drove to the discount grocery store parking lot and sat in my car for a minute before going in. I did it because I wanted to look at the numbers again. I wanted to make sure I did not miss something. I wanted to make sure I could pay rent and still buy food. I had pride, but pride does not pay bills. On a Thursday afternoon, my mother called. Her voice was careful. She said the company was having a milestone event. She said there would be family. She said it would look strange if I did not show up. She did not ask me to smile. She asked me to be civil. I told her I understood. I told her I could come for a short time. I shaved, put on the one jacket that still fit well, and drove to the company headquarters. The lobby was polished. The floor looked like water when light hit it. There were framed photos along one wall. They were the kind of photos used to tell a story. My grandfather cutting a ribbon. My uncle shaking hands with a local official. A group photo of employees in matching shirts. I saw one photo that used to include me in the background. In the old version, I stood near a stack of boxes, watching the camera like I was surprised to be included. In the frame now, that corner looked cropped. I did not know if it was on purpose, but it felt like a quiet message. At the front desk, a young assistant asked my name. She did not recognize me. I said it calmly. She looked at a list, then asked if I was a guest. I said yes. I did not correct her. I did not explain that I once had my own badge with my name and department on it. I did not explain that I used to walk past that desk without stopping. She gave me a paper wristband and pointed me toward the event room. Inside, people were laughing. There were tall tables, small plates, and a screen showing slides about growth and vision. I saw some faces I knew. I also saw new people wearing suits that looked expensive, with smiles that looked practiced. I spotted my mother near the back. She looked relieved when she saw me. She hugged me and asked if I was okay. I said I was fine. I asked her if she had eaten. She told me to stay close. She said Ronan would be here soon. It was strange to hear his name like that, like he was a weather front moving in. When he entered, the room changed. People turned toward him. A few phones lifted. Someone tapped him on the shoulder and pointed at the camera near the stage. Ronan shook hands and smiled. He did not rush. He moved like he had all the time in the world. When he saw me, he paused just long enough to let other people notice the moment. He came over and put his hand on my shoulder. It was not rough. It was controlled. He asked how I was doing, but his eyes were scanning the room. I told him I was doing all right. He spoke in a friendly tone and told me it was good that I came. He said family should show up, even when times are hard. He said it like a lesson. I nodded. I kept my face calm. He then talked about the company like it was a personal story of victory. He said the company was now worth around $520 million. He said it loud enough for the nearest tables to hear. He said it with a smile that asked for admiration. A few people laughed softly and said that was amazing. Someone near us said Ronan had turned everything around. Another person said the future looked strong. Ronan looked at me again and asked if I remembered the old days. He said my grandfather would be proud. Then, with the same calm smile, he said I was never in the will. He said my grandfather had made that clear. He said it in a way that sounded final, like it was already printed and filed and stamped. My mother's face tightened. She looked down at her hands. I felt heat in my ears, but I did not move. I did not want to give him the reaction he was asking for. I had learned that some people collect reactions like trophies. I told him I understood. He kept talking. He said it was sad when people could not keep up with modern business. He said some people were better suited for smaller roles. He said the company needed leaders who could handle pressure. I nodded again. I did not argue. If I argued, he would say I was unstable. If I got emotional, he would say I proved his point. A man in a suit stepped closer, like he was part of Ronan's circle. He looked at me and asked what I did these days. His tone was polite, but it had a sharp edge, like he already knew the answer. I said I was between roles and looking for the right fit. Ronan gave a small laugh and said I always took my time with decisions. He said that was why I never got ahead. My mother touched my arm, like she wanted me to leave before I said something I could not take back. I told her I would step out for air. I walked out of the event room and into the hallway. The lobby was quieter. I could still hear the low sound of voices behind me, like a distant machine. I stood near the framed photos again. I looked at my grandfather's face in one of them. He was smiling, but his eyes looked focused, like he was looking past the camera. I remembered how he used to speak to me when we were alone. He would speak slowly. He would say that life is a long game. He would say that loud people burn fast. I walked outside and stood near the building entrance. The air was cold and clean. My hands were shaking a little, so I put them in my pockets. I did not feel like shouting. I felt like something inside me had clicked into place. Not anger. More like clarity. Like a door closing behind me. I drove home early. I did not say goodbye to Ronan. I did not need to. At my apartment, the silence felt heavy. I made tea and sat at my small kitchen table. The chair creaked the way it always did. The walls were thin enough that I could hear a neighbor's television through the drywall. I opened the drawer where I kept old papers. It was a mix of things I could not throw away and things I did not know where else to put. A faded photo of my grandfather and me on the factory floor. A few old company notes. A birthday card from my mother. At the bottom, under a stack of receipts, I found a small slip of paper. It was yellowed and soft at the edges. It had a bank name and a box number written in my grandfather's handwriting. There was also a short note, just a few words, like a reminder to himself. I stared at it for a long time. I remembered that my grandfather used to use the bank across town. He said he liked the manager because she was careful and steady. He said careful people kept the world running. I did not know if that same manager was still there. I did not even know if the box was still active. I also did not know why my grandfather would leave something in a safe deposit box and not tell anyone. He was not secretive in daily life. He was private, but not confusing. If he did something like this, he did it for a reason. The next day, after I finished a short job interview that went nowhere, I drove to the bank. The building looked older than the company headquarters. The glass doors were clean, but the inside felt plain. There was no performance here, just counters, lines, and paperwork. A teller asked what I needed. I said I wanted to close a safe deposit box. I gave the box number. The teller's expression changed slightly. She said she needed to get the manager. After a few minutes, a woman came out from an office. She introduced herself as Ms. Patel. She asked me to sit in her office. Her voice was calm and professional. She pulled up the records. She looked at the screen longer than I expected. Then she looked at me and asked if I understood there were unpaid fees. I said yes, and I asked how much. She told me it was $15 a year. She said the box had not been paid for about 40 years. She said the total with their standard editions was about $600. My stomach tightened. I had expected a problem, but hearing the number out loud made it real. $600 was not a small bump for me. It was a wall. I told her the truth. I said I did not have that amount available. Ms. Patel did not react with pity in an obvious way. She just looked at me for a moment. Then she asked me who the box belonged to originally. I told her it was my grandfather, Walter Pike. She paused, then nodded slowly. She said she remembered the name. She said he had been a long-term client and always paid on time back then. She asked if he was family. I said yes. I said I was his grandson. She leaned back in her chair and tapped her pen once on the desk, like she was thinking through rules and options. Then she told me there were circumstances where the bank could waive fees, depending on the situation and the history of the account. I did not speak. I waited. I did not want to push. Ms. Patel took a breath and said she would waive the fee this one time. She said she would document it and proceed with the closing. She said I would need to show identification and sign a few forms. I thanked her. My voice sounded smaller than I wanted, but it was honest. She stood and said she would have someone escort us to the vault area. I followed her down a hallway that smelled like clean paper and old carpet. My heart was beating fast, but my face stayed calm. I kept thinking about Ronan's smile from the night before and my grandfather's handwriting on that slip of paper and how the world could change in one day without making a sound. In that hallway, with the plain carpet and the quiet lights, I kept thinking about how I got there. Not just the bank, not just the box. I mean how I became the person who needed a favor to open something that belonged to my own family. When I was a teenager, my grandfather Walter used to pick me up early on Saturdays. He drove an old truck that smelled like clean oil and peppermint. He did not talk much on the drive. He would just tap the steering wheel and watch the road. At the factory, he did not introduce me like a show. He just said I was there to learn. He had me carry small parts, sweep a corner, and watch how people moved. He taught me names. He told me to look at faces, not titles. He said a company is not only machines and money. He said it is trust. He said if people trust you, they will work hard even on bad days. I believed him. My uncle Ronan also came around, but he came in bursts. He did not show up at 6 a.m. He showed up when there was a visitor, a camera, or a lunch meeting. He wore clean shoes on the factory floor. He shook hands like he was running for something. Walter did not seem impressed by that. He was polite to Ronan, but firm. He kept Ronan at a distance from the daily work. As I got older, I stayed. I studied local business classes at night and worked at the company during the day. I learned shipping, inventory, vendor calls, and customer complaints. I learned how to calm a problem instead of making it bigger. People called me steady. They also called me quiet. In the beginning, I thought those words were praise. When I was in my 30s, I became an operations manager. I did not get a big office. I got a desk that faced the floor. That was fine with me. I liked being close to the work. I liked hearing the machines. I liked walking out to fix an issue instead of sending 3 messages first. Ronan did not like that kind of work. Ronan liked meetings. He liked saying vision and growth. He liked speaking in a way that made people look at him. For years, Walter balanced it. He let Ronan do the public side, but he kept the actual control tight. Walter would listen, then decide, then move on. Ronan would smile and accept it, but you could feel he was counting the days until he did not have to accept it anymore. I did not think about it much. I was busy. I had a small life that fit inside the company. I paid my bills, helped my mother when she needed it, and tried to keep peace in the family. Peace felt like a good goal back then. Then Walter was no longer around, and the air changed fast. At first, it was small. A meeting invite would go out, and my name would not be on it. I would hear about a decision after it was made. I would ask a coworker what happened, and they would shrug and say it must be a new process. Then it became bigger. Ronan brought in a consulting group. They walked the floor with clipboards and fancy shoes. They asked simple questions like they were deep questions. They would look at me and ask who I reported to. I said I reported to the executive team and that I managed operations. They would nod, but they would not write it down like it mattered. Ronan started holding meetings in rooms I was never invited into. He started using words like restructure and streamline. He said the company needed to look modern. He said customers wanted a stronger image. I remember one meeting where he stood at the front and talked about leadership. He said the future belonged to bold people. He said the old way was too slow. I sat there and listened. I was not against change. I just knew that change needs real work behind it. A new logo does not fix a late shipment. A new slogan does not train a new hire. After that meeting, a coworker pulled me aside and quietly told me Ronan was building a new executive list. The coworker did not say my name was missing. He did not have to. His eyes told me. At home, I tried to act normal. I told myself it was a phase. I told myself Ronan would need steady people to keep things running. I told myself the family connection still meant something. Then my badge stopped working at one door. It was not the main door. It was a side door that led to a small office area where some key files were kept. I used that door for years. One morning, the light on the badge reader stayed red. I stood there for a few seconds and tried again. Same result. I felt my face warm, even though nobody was watching. I walked around to another entrance and entered through the main hall like a visitor. A receptionist looked at me and asked if I needed help. I said I was fine. I smiled like it did not matter. That day I went to the IT desk and asked about my badge. A young technician said he could not change access without an approved request. He said it was policy. He said I should talk to executive operations. Executive operations was Ronan's new phrase for his inner circle. When I asked Ronan about it later, he spoke in a light tone. He said he was improving security. He said it was nothing personal. He said I should not take things so hard. He said it like I was being sensitive. Around that time, my pay changed without warning. It did not stop, but it shifted. Some parts moved to a different label. Some parts became temporary adjustments. It was not clear. When I asked HR, they said it was under review. I started to feel like I was standing on a floor that was slowly sliding. At family gatherings, Ronan began telling my story for me. He would talk about the company and mention me like a side note. He would say I was good with details, but not leadership. He would say I preferred small tasks. He would say I did not like pressure. People would nod. They would look at me and smile politely, like they were listening to a gentle explanation of why I should not be taken seriously. I stayed calm. I stayed polite. I thought if I kept acting like an adult, the truth would speak for itself. But truth does not speak if nobody gives it a microphone. My mother struggled the most. She wanted family unity. She wanted everyone to have a place at the table. She would call me and say Ronan was under stress. She would say the company needed stability. She would ask me to be patient. I told her I understood. I did not want to make her choose between her brother and her son. I also did not want to admit how bad it felt. I did not want her to worry. So I did what I always did. I tried to carry the weight quietly. Then came the day I was asked to clean out my office space. It was not even an office. It was a small room with a desk and a filing cabinet. A person from HR came with a cardboard box and a checklist. She said the company was reorganizing departments. She said my role was being dissolved. She said it was not a judgment of my work. She said I would receive details later. I asked what later meant. She said she did not know. She said she was following instructions. I asked if Ronan would speak to me directly. She said he was busy. I kept my face neutral and packed my things. I put my grandfather's old photo in the box last. I carried the box through the hallway like I was carrying a part of myself out of the building. In the parking lot, I sat in my car with the box on the passenger seat and stared at the steering wheel. I did not cry. I did not shout. I just felt empty, like a room after furniture is removed. After that, my life tightened fast. Job interviews came and went. Some went well until they asked about my last role and why I left. I would explain it in calm terms. I would say there was a restructure. I would say my role was removed. I would say I was ready for a new chapter. Sometimes the interviewer would smile and say they understood. Then I would not hear back. Money became a daily math problem. I stopped buying small extras. I drove less. I canceled things I did not need. I told myself this was temporary. I told myself I had years of experience and would land on my feet. Then I heard about the company in public news. There were articles online praising Ronan's leadership. People in the comments said he was a genius. They said the company was stronger than ever. They said the family legacy was in good hands. I read those words in the public library at a quiet desk because I did not want to waste my phone data. I stared at the screen and felt like I was reading about strangers. When I visited my mother, she tried to act like nothing was broken. She would cook, ask about my day, and talk about neighbors. Then she would mention Ronan in a careful way, like testing if it would hurt. She said he was planning a big event. She said there would be important people there. She said he wanted to honor Walter's legacy. I told her I was glad the company was doing well. That was the truth in a way. I wanted the employees to have stable jobs. I wanted the work to continue. I did not want the company to collapse just because the family was messy. But I also knew Ronan was using Walter's name like a shield. The worst part was how people treated me when they thought I could not help them anymore. Some old contacts stopped returning my calls. Some family friends stopped inviting me to gatherings. It felt like my value had been linked to my access. Then, the night of the milestone event at headquarters, Ronan said the line out loud in front of people. He said, I was never in the will. He said it like a final stamp. I did not know if it was true. I also did not know why he felt the need to say it in public. But I understood the message. He wanted everyone to believe I had no claim, no standing, and no future. And now, in the bank hallway, I understood something else. If Ronan was so sure, why did my grandfather's handwriting lead me here? I had lived in small doubts for too long. I had spent years trying to be patient and reasonable. I had hoped respect would return on its own. But respect does not return to the person who keeps stepping back. As Ms. Patel walked ahead of me toward the vault area, I decided that whatever was in that box, I would treat it like a fact, not a feeling. I would not make a scene. I would not argue in parking lots or family chats. I would not chase people who enjoyed watching me chase. I would simply learn what was true, and then I would handle it the right way. We reached the vault area through a second door with a keypad. The air felt cooler there. It smelled like metal and clean paper. Ms. Patel walked with the same steady pace the whole time. She did not rush me. She did not try to fill the silence. A staff member led us into a small room with a narrow table. There were rules posted on the wall in plain language. There was a camera in the corner, not hidden. The room looked designed to remove drama from people's lives. You sit, you sign, you open, you close. Then you leave. Ms. Patel placed a thin folder on the table. She said it was the record for the box. She said I needed to confirm my identity and sign that I was the person allowed to close it. She said the bank would document everything for its own protection and for mine. I gave her my identification. She compared it to the records and asked a few simple questions. I answered with short sentences. I was trying to keep my breathing even. My hands felt too warm for a cold room. When I signed, I noticed my handwriting looked different than it did in my 20s. It looked slower. The letters were heavier. It made me think about time and how time does not ask permission. Ms. Patel nodded once and said she would retrieve the box. She left the room. I was alone for a minute with the staff member nearby. He kept a neutral face, like he was trained to look away from other people's lives. I sat with my hands on my knees and listened to the quiet. My phone vibrated once in my pocket. I did not check it. When Ms. Patel returned, she carried a long, rectangular container. She placed it on the table carefully, as if it mattered even if she did not know why. She said I would be the one to open it, and that was important for the record. She handed me a key that had been stored with the bank. I held the key and looked at the lock. My grandfather's handwriting on that old slip of paper was still in my mind. I felt like I was standing in front of a door he had locked decades ago and had decided, for some reason, that I should be the person to open it. I turned the key. The lock clicked. It was a simple sound, but it landed in my chest like a heavy step. I lifted the lid. Inside were items arranged like someone had planned them, not tossed them in. There were small cloth sleeves stacked in rows. There was a flat envelope with a stiff edge. And there was a larger sealed envelope on top, centered like a final line. My eyes went to the larger envelope first. It was thick. It looked old, but protected. The paper was heavier than normal mail. My name was written in careful handwriting. Under it, in smaller letters, were words that made my throat tighten. It said it was for my grandson on his 50th birthday. I did not touch it yet. I stared at it until my eyes started to sting. Ms. Patel asked if I was all right. Her voice was quiet, not curious, just human. I told her I was okay. I told her I just needed a moment. She nodded and gave me the moment. She looked down at the folder as if she was busy, but I could tell she was watching the pace of my breathing in her peripheral vision. I moved the sealed envelope to the side, carefully, like it was fragile. Under it, I saw the cloth sleeves more clearly. I opened one and saw a gold coin. Then another. Then another. They were not loose. They were protected and counted. They looked like they had been placed there by someone who wanted them to survive time. I did not know much about gold coins, but I knew what they were. I had seen them in magazines and behind glass. I did not expect to see them in my hands. I opened more sleeves and saw the same coin again and again, identical in weight and shine. I stopped after a few because I did not need to count in the room. I could see it was a serious amount. My mouth felt dry. I swallowed and told myself to stay calm. Money can make people move fast in their minds. I did not want to move fast. I wanted to move right. I set the coins back where they were and reached for the flat envelope. It was stiff like it held thick paper. I opened it and slid out a bundle of documents. The top sheet had a corporate look, with clean type and a date that made my brain stall for a second. 1985. Below that were details about shares. Apple. A number that looked unreal to me in that moment. I stared at the documents and felt the room tilt slightly. Not like I was going to fall, but like my body did not trust what my eyes were seeing. I was not the kind of person who daydreamed about sudden fortune. My life had been too practical for that. I counted groceries. I measured gas. I delayed dentist visits. The idea that my grandfather had placed this here and left it untouched for decades felt like a hidden room inside my own history. Ms. Patel asked if I wanted water. I said yes. I said it would help. She stepped out again. When she returned, she handed me a small bottle and said I could take as much time as I needed. She added that she would need to complete the closure paperwork after I was done, but there was no rush. I thanked her again. I meant it. Her steadiness was the first kindness I felt from an institution in a long time. I sat there and looked at the sealed letter again. It was the center of the box, even with gold and shares sitting beside it. It felt like the point of all of it. My fingers hovered near the seal. Then I pulled them back. The words on the front were clear. It was meant for my 50th birthday. That was not a suggestion. That was a boundary my grandfather set, even from a distance. I did not know why he chose that date. I did not know what he expected me to understand then, and not now. But I could respect his instruction. I told myself I would not open it early. I would not break the one rule that was stated so plainly. At the same time, I could feel something rising in me that was not excitement. It was a kind of quiet strength. Not because of the gold or the shares, but because the box proved something simple. Ronan was not the only person who knew the truth. For months, Ronan had spoken like he owned the past and the future. He had said things like they were facts carved in stone. He had said I was never in the will, and he had made sure people heard it. Now I was sitting in a bank vault with my name written in my grandfather's hand on an envelope that had been waiting for me for decades. I did not know the full shape of the truth yet, but I knew Ronan did not. Ms. Patel asked if I wanted a private room to review the contents. I said the table was fine. I told her I just needed to make sure I handled everything correctly. She said the bank could provide a receipt for the closure and a record of the contents as I removed them, if I wanted. She said it was not required, but it could protect me later. She said she did not give advice, but she had seen families fight over far less. I told her I wanted every step documented. She nodded like she expected that answer. We went through the process. I counted the coin sleeves without rushing. I listed them as I placed them into a plain bank envelope. I slid the Apple documents into a stiff folder and kept them flat. Ms. Patel noted the items in neutral terms, without putting value labels on them. She treated it like record-keeping, not treasure. The sealed letter stayed separate. I placed it into its own protective sleeve without bending it. I kept the seal untouched. When everything was packed, Ms. Patel asked if I had a safe place to keep it. I told her I did. It was not fully true yet, but I needed it to be true, so I would make it true. She completed the closure forms. She said the box would be marked closed in their system. She said there would be no future fees. She said she would print my receipt. As the printer ran in her office, I sat in the vault room and looked at the blank wall. My mind moved through practical steps. Where would I store this? Who would I tell, if anyone? How would I keep my mother safe from worry? How would I stop Ronan from getting even a cent of this before I understood it? The paper in my hand was not just paper anymore. It was leverage, even if I did not fully understand its shape. It was proof that I was not crazy for feeling pushed out. It was proof that my grandfather did not forget me. It was proof that the story Ronan told was not the only story that existed. When Ms. Patel returned with the receipt, she looked at me and said I should be careful. She said, "People change when they smell money." She said, I did not need to explain myself to anyone. I told her I understood. I told her I would be careful. She walked me back through the hallway and out into the public part of the bank. The normal sounds felt too loud after the quiet vault. A teller was laughing softly with a customer. A pen clinked against a counter. The world kept moving like nothing had happened. Outside, the sky was pale. I carried the plain envelope and folder in a simple tote bag. No labels, no special case. I wanted it to look like paperwork. In my car, I did not start the engine right away. I placed everything on the passenger seat and stared at the steering wheel. My hands were steady now. My breathing was steady. The emotions were there, but they were contained, like water behind a dam. I did not feel like shouting. I did not feel like calling Ronan. I did not feel like telling anyone. I felt something better. I felt calm. I took out my phone and opened my calendar. I looked at the date of my 50th birthday. It was less than a year away. It suddenly did not feel like a normal birthday. It felt like a key date my grandfather had chosen for a reason. I drove home slowly. At every red light, I looked around to make sure I was not being followed. I knew it sounded paranoid, but I also knew family conflicts can turn sharp when money is involved. I did not want sharp. I wanted clean. At my apartment, I locked the door, then locked it again without thinking. I cleared my kitchen table. I laid out a plain folder, a marker, and a small notebook. I wrote the date at the top of the first page. I wrote where I went and who I spoke to. I wrote Ms. Patel's name. Then I wrote one sentence that felt like a promise. I wrote that I would handle this through proper channels. I did not know the full plan yet. I did not know what the sealed letter said. But I knew I would not improvise my future in a moment of emotion. I placed the envelope of coins and the Apple documents into a locked case I used for important papers. Then I took the sealed letter and held it for a long time. The seal was still intact. My name was still there. I set it down gently and turned off the kitchen light. That night, my phone buzzed with a message from the family group chat. Ronan was posting photos from the company event. He was smiling under bright lights. People were commenting with praise and small applause symbols. I did not respond. I put the phone face down on the table, sat back in my chair, and listened to the quiet hum of my refrigerator. For the first time in a long time, I did not feel like a person waiting to be pushed. I felt like a person standing still on solid ground, finally ready to look up. The next morning, I woke up before my alarm. The room was still dark. The heater clicked on and off like it was thinking. I lay there and listened to it, then sat up slowly. I did not reach for the sealed letter. I did not even look at it. I told myself again that it had a date for a reason. If my grandfather wanted me to open it early, he would have said so. The front was clear. I decided I would not be the person who broke the one clear instruction. Instead, I focused on what I could do without breaking anything. I made coffee and sat at my small table with my notebook. I wrote down the facts I already had, in plain words. I wrote the bank name. I wrote the box number. I wrote the manager's name. I wrote the day and time I closed the box. I wrote that the fee was waived. I wrote that I asked for everything to be documented. Then I wrote a second list. This one was not facts. It was questions. I wrote why my uncle felt so confident saying I was never in the will. I wrote when he started taking control. I wrote who helped him. I wrote what changed in the company after my grandfather was no longer around. I wrote what my grandfather might have wanted me to do at 50. When I finished, I stared at the page until the coffee got cold. Later that day, I drove to a small storage unit on the edge of town. It was not far, but it felt like another world. The office was quiet. A worker handed me a key and a simple contract to rent a unit. I signed without drama. I paid for the smallest one. I told myself it was not permanent. It was a layer of safety. It was distance between my home and anything that mattered. I did not put the sealed letter in the storage unit. I kept that with me. But I placed the heavier items in a locked container and moved them into the unit. I did it slowly, like I was moving fragile glass, not metal and paper. When I closed the unit door, the metal latch sounded final. On the drive back, my phone buzzed with another group chat message. I did not open it at the red light. I waited until I got home. Then, I turned the phone over and read the new messages. Ronan had posted more photos. He had also written a long message about legacy. He wrote about family values. He wrote about leadership and responsibility. He did not mention my name. He did not need to. The message was aimed at anyone who might ask questions later. It was a soft wall built in advance. I put the phone down and opened my laptop. I went to the public library later that evening because their internet was faster and I did not want extra costs at home. I sat at a quiet desk and searched for articles about the company. I read business profiles. I read local news pieces. I looked for dates and names. I did not find anything dramatic, but I found patterns. I found the first public mention of Ronan as executive leader shortly after my grandfather was no longer around. I found a mention of a new board chair. I found a phrase about modern governance and streamlined decision-making. It sounded professional. It also sounded like a door closing. I printed a few pages, not because they were secrets, but because I wanted a clean timeline on paper. I kept my face neutral at the printer. The librarian did not care what I printed. Nobody cared. That was the strange part. This was my family history and my work life, and to everyone else it was just another set of pages sliding into a tray. 2 days later, I visited my mother. I brought simple groceries with me because it was a habit and it made me feel useful. She opened the door and looked at my face like she was checking for cracks. She asked if I was okay after the company event. I told her I was all right. I told her I left early. She sighed and said Ronan did not have to say things like that in public. She said he could have kept it private. She said he was always competitive, even as a boy. I spoke calmly with my mother, asking only what she remembered: papers, rushed decisions, without burdening her with coins, shares, or the sealed letter. She admitted trusting Ronan's confidence while overwhelmed. Grandfather's words on patience lingered. I hired Ava Chen, methodical, precise, told her plainly, pushed out, name erased, grandfather's intent ignored. She stressed facts over emotion, timelines over drama. Routine became anchor. Mondays courthouse records, Wednesdays Ava check-ins, Fridays coffee shop timelines. No heroics, just organized persistence. Ronan performed publicly, posts, legacy talk, charity gala honoring himself. Invitation arrived, my name labeled guest. Gala night, dressed simply, sat quietly. Ronan owned the stage, invoking grandfather's name. Ava signaled. Side room, board chair, Nora, Omar, documents ready. I opened grandfather's letter at Ava's request. Handwriting clear. Trust held control, triggered at my 50th. Voting shares to me, Ronan mere steward. Gold, Apple shares for legal funds if needed. Instruction, answer erasure with records, not anger. Documents verified, trust papers, notarizations, valuations. Nora paused program, summoned Ronan. He blustered, confusion, bitterness. Nora silenced him, governance, liability. Board voted swiftly. Ronan suspended, authority frozen, temporary committee appointed. Back in ballroom.